guests. We are pleased to have you back on another panel. Our next session, panel number 3, entitled The Sandbox Effect, Enabling Innovation in a Controlled Environment. Let me dig further with you on this panel. This panel will discuss how regulatory sandboxes create safe, controlled environments for testing innovation, while regulators balance innovation with consumer protection, data privacy, and the challenges of scaling successful pilots into real-world applications. Please welcome our panelists. Our moderator for this panel is Mr. Stephen Griffith, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Absolute Collateral. Welcome on stage. And joining him, our speakers, Mr. Stephen Chow, Chairman of Saham Capital, Mrs. Suzy Azira, Chief Operating Officer at Bahrain Fintech Bay, Mrs. Yasmin Al-Sharaf, Director Strategy and Financial Sector Development at Central Bank of Bahrain. Thank you all, and we look forward for this segment to hear your insightful impact on this topic.
Hello. Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third panel, the Sandbox Effect, Enabling Innovation in a Controlled Environment. In today's world, innovation needs both creative freedom and structure. Regulatory sandboxes sit precisely at that intersection, a structured environment that creates room to explore while keeping risks contained. They enable confident experimentation, they safeguard stability, and they accelerate the path from idea to market-ready innovation. In this panel, we're going to explore how that plays out in reality through regulation, ecosystem activation, and real-world scaling. Joining me today are 3 leaders who represent the full life cycle of innovation. Yasmin from the Central Bank, shaping policy and governance, Suzy from Bahrain Fintech Bay, orchestrating Bahrain innovation ecosystem, and Steve that brings the corporate and multi-market execution perspective. I'll let everyone just introduce themselves quickly. Steve?
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Chow. I'm representing Saham Capital, the very first online broker from Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Suzy Azira, and I'm here representing Bahrain Fintech Bay. For those of you that are new to Bahrain and just visiting, welcome to Bahrain. We're looking really forward to being part of this panel, and I'll pass you on to Yasmin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Yasmin Al-Sharaf. I'm the Director of Strategy and Financial Sector Development at the Central Bank. I actually just recently celebrated my 20th year anniversary at the Central Bank of Bahrain. So regulation is part of my DNA. Looking forward to the panel.
Thank you. So I thought we would structure the panel into 5 areas. The foundation, the ecosystem activation, real-world scale, the part 2 of that, and then a nice wrap-up. So let's begin. So with section 1, our foundation, to build anything meaningful, we start with the foundation. In Bahrain, the regulatory sandbox was not created as a symbolic gesture. It was built with real intent and real structure. This section explores why the sandbox exists, what principles shaped it, and how Bahrain has learned to balance innovation with protection. Yasmin, if I could start with you. Bahrain was one of the first regions to adopt a regulatory sandbox with real intent, not just a signal. Looking back, what was the most valuable lesson Bahrain learned early on about how to structure a sandbox that genuinely encourages innovation rather than simply observe it?
So, Stephen, I think the real success of regulatory sandboxes is not necessarily measured in the number of companies that join or the number of companies that graduate, but the real measure of success is the market impact that is created because of the solutions being tested. how these solutions are solving for existing inefficiencies in the market. That's the first real success factor. The second success factor is the regulatory learning that it brings about. Like you rightly said, in Bahrain, we started very early by establishing the region's first sandbox environment in 2017. And our intent was, when establishing the sandbox, is having an engine for innovation. So it wasn't just merely to have a viewing gallery. And we've had 8 good years to learn from the sandbox experience. And maybe one of the biggest lessons that we learned is that, regardless of the structure of the sandbox, the most crucial success factor would be the regulatory mindset. Innovation is fueled by enabling regulations, by an enabling regulatory environment. That saying that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast? It's the same thing, right? Regulators need to move away from the mere gatekeeper role to a more proactive, collaborative role. Regulators who remain reactive will end up falling behind the market, and innovation will not wait for those regulations. Yes, we are primarily guardians for financial stability and market integrity, but we also have to be stewards for financial innovation. And this is something that we did at the Central Bank of Bahrain. We adopted this proactive, collaborative approach. Now, in terms of the actual structure, maybe what worked for us at the Central Bank of Bahrain was having a sandbox that is both technology agnostic and regulations flexible. What does that mean? It basically means having an open mindset, an open scope, allowing new high potential use cases to be admitted into the sandbox, to be tested within the environment long before the regulations or the licensing framework is in place. And that really helps us then learn more about those solutions and develop the relevant enabling regulations required to support them. And this has really led us to accepting very early on solutions revolving around crypto assets, for example, open banking, tokenization, which ultimately led to Bahrain being amongst the region's leaders in issuing regulations on crypto assets, open banking, just to name a few. So I really feel that our approach in Bahrain enabled us to utilize the sandbox as a catalyst for transformation in financial services. And this is a clear message that we have in Bahrain. In Bahrain, we're ready to learn, adapt, and to regulate based on real empirical evidence rather than theory.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And Susie, what makes an ecosystem genuinely ready for capital markets innovation? And where do you see Bahrain today on that journey?
Good question. I'm just going to bounce on what Yasmin said. She talks a lot about regulation, and regulation is obviously fundamental, is the central bank and all of the frameworks that we have in place. Another side for coming from an ecosystem builder was what we call ourselves as Bahrain FinTech Bay, especially obviously for fintech. You need to have the utilization of the infrastructure where the banks are willing to experiment. We have fintechs that are willing to build, and you also have the enabler, which I'd consider Bahrain FinTech Bay. We were, shortly after the central bank, we were set up by the Economic Development Board to help fintechs enable them into the market. So in order to have an ecosystem, as you're saying, this applies to capital markets as well, and I'll drive that home in a little bit. But you need to have a market access for these fintechs or these innovations that are coming in. They need to be able to be introduced to people, to be acclimatized into this. Talent, I think the talent is really important. That I'll speak a little bit later on about how we're cultivating that as an ecosystem builder. These are all areas that when we first started at Bahrain FinTech Bay, we had to create awareness around concepts of fintech. Concepts, when you talk about tokenization, how do you translate that into where it goes and so on. Obviously, also, lastly, but certainly not least, is funding. And that's something I think we as well can improve more and more in general. But access to getting these fintechs that are coming here in order to do this innovation, funding. At the end of the day, we're looking to an ecosystem enabler is there to help companies grow. And it's the same when you talk about capital markets. Ultimately, they want to be IPO viable. Ultimately, you want to see more liquidation into the marketplace, and that drives innovation. So I hope that kind of helps. It applies to fintech and it applies obviously to capital markets as well.
Thank you, and that leads nicely on to Steve. Given Valuable Capital Group's experience operating across different regulated markets, how do you see the role of regulatory sandboxes globally, and how has your multi-market compliance experience shaped your approach to innovation?
Thanks, Stephen. So I believe that all the innovation are coming from the client demand. So all the technology or initiative are deriving from our existing offering. For example, from Hong Kong to Saudi to Bahrain, we get the VATP license from Hong Kong SFC. We are in the sandbox of CMA as a social trading provider. These are actually from our clients' demand. For example, some of them may, leaving the fiat system, they are demanding for tokenized products, okay? And some of them are, not satisfying with existing advisory services, so they are, demanding for the social trading functions. And not to mention about the community function, like, people are always willing to gossip around on certain underlines or events. They're lacking of a proper managed and monitored environment. So that's where we come from. And I believe that we are the best practicer in terms of this kind of cross-border sandbox participants.
Thank you. Really appreciate everyone's responses. And what we heard in this section is that Sandbox wasn't built just for experimentation alone. It was built with clear principles, deliberate structure, and early lessons that have shaped innovation and protection, and how innovation and protection can coexist. This leads nicely on how we can activate the market into our section 2. So for me, sandboxes don't work just in isolation. It works when the ecosystem moves around it. Startups, regulators, banks, corporates, investors, all interacting with trust and clarity. So with this section of activation, how do we turn a sandbox from a regulatory tool into a living, breathing, and engine of collaboration? So Yasmin, if I can start with you. Sandboxes are often described as a space to innovate safely, but they also have to protect market stability and consumer trust. From your perspective, what practical mechanisms help to strike that right balance between allowing experimentation while maintaining safeguards?
I think, Stephen, one of the biggest challenges that we face as regulators in this age and time is striking the right balance, having regulations that do not stifle innovation but don't compromise on stability and integrity. And it really starts with the sandbox, and the sandbox is a great tool to provide us with more transparency or with more visibility to understand the risk behaviors associated with those emerging business models and solutions. And that will kind of support us in formulating the right regulations and controls. However, within the regulatory sandbox space as well, it's very important to ensure responsible testing, and that the testing and the risks associated with the testing does not spill out into the market. For us at the Central Bank of Bahrain, we follow adopt two different mechanisms to try and control risks associated with testing. The first is we have a very firm stance when it comes to financial integrity. AML, CFT compliance, they're not negotiable. And sandbox companies are required to be in full compliance with AML, CFT requirements and regulations. This really provides us also as a chance to assess whether those startups are able to maintain strong controls and safeguards even before they scale to the market. The second mechanism is that we impose time-bound guardrails, if you like. So we impose limitations on the access to customers, so thresholds on the number of volunteer customers that any sandbox company can deal with for the purpose of testing. And we also provide limitations on the volume and value of transactions. And this really helps us to kind of control the unmitigated risks associated with those tests from spilling into the wider market. However, the real safeguards come outside of the sandbox once those solutions are ready to scale and be integrated into the market. And for that, we require having balanced regulations, as I mentioned earlier. The way we operate or adopt this in Bahrain is we follow, I would say, principles and outcome-based regulations. Regulations that take proportionality into consideration. That is very important. And to make sure as well that our regulations are in sync with global best standards. They're in sync with the the perception of the market. So we always engage our markets through industry consultations. We work very closely with the innovators themselves in the sandbox process, and we benchmark. We benchmark global jurisdictions to make sure that there is some sense of harmonization in regulations globally, and that is very important as well in the digital space to avoid any loopholes in the global kind of digital space.
Yeah, exactly. And from my experience, those guardrails in the sandbox are really useful. And from outside, coming from the UK, you can see that similarity, so that's really good. So Susie, from your experience, how is Bahrain FinTech Bay actively bridging that gap between startups, regulators, and financial institutions to move innovation from discussion to development?
You know, one of the meatier challenges in innovation is this go-to-market for these fintechs. And I think, you know, fintechs have the ideas, banks have the mandates, and then the regulators, the guardrails. Where do we sit as in Bahrain FinTech Bay? We are, as I mentioned before, we're enablers, and we're there to help bridge all those gaps as a whole, because we are neither partial to any of them. We're not vendors to the bank, we're not regulators, but we're there to support the fintechs coming in. And I think one of the key things, and I was watching this on both His Excellency's speeches just earlier this day, is that how important it is that we're forming partnerships. They were talking about we're no longer about, you know, each individual country, about Bahrain. When we started 7-8 years ago, Yasmin, you remember this, it was very much, you know, Bahrain was doing what its agenda, Saudi was doing with agenda. For us, partnerships is the fuel now in fintech, and ecosystem building. We've recently signed with, I mean, not even recently, with FinTech Saudi. We're partners with DIFC's Hive. We're partners with ADGM's 971. And in general, what that does is that, you know, we're now a market where we need to enable across the region. We recently hosted our FinTech Forward National Conference last month.
It was very good.
Yeah, thank you. And basically one of the key areas to talk about is regional integration. And I think you asked about, you know, how do you bridge it? You know, we need to bridge, okay, the local ecosystem, but it's also becoming bridging the GCC as a whole. You know, people are coming for the whole region. And I think that's a really important thing, and that basically as Bahrain FinTech Bay, what we do is, in order to bridge the local, whether you're talking regulators and so on, we will do programs with fintechs. We will support them in acceleration programs. We're an incubator, an accelerator. So we help them progress. We help them introduce them to the banks, get them, you know, their bank accounts, sort them out with all the things they need to. So how do we bridge? We sort of act in the middle of them all without really giving, you know, being non-partial, if the word is, just being in the middle and being how do you say, an enabler to that.
Yeah, and that bank account is super important. So yeah, any help with that is always great. Steve, from your perspective as an entrepreneur, how do you see this?
Well, so when we talk about this, I believe the only factor we need to concern about is the risk management. Okay, how to manage the risk. For us, we do apply a very different approach, which is that we proactively and voluntarily to update to our regulator quarterly. We proactively, you know, update what are the new functions, new initiative to our regulator. Okay, and then seeking for their advice, and then we come out with a solution together. And also, in terms of like the service, whether it's pre-trade, the trade, post-trade. For pre-trade, we do apply a lot of educations, a lot of monitoring. For post-trade, we do apply for like the AI client services. You know, all these are driven by technology. So from regulator to the investor to the broker, then we can work together on this based on the risk management.
Thank you. I think it's really clear from this section that the ecosystem, when the ecosystem is engaged, regulators provide that clarity, innovators help to kind of push the boundaries, and institutions build the trust needed for meaningful collaboration. And this leads nicely, turning activation into real-world outcomes. So this is our third section, real-world scale. Many innovators prove their value in sandboxes, and the next step is to unlock that full potential in the real world. So this is where kind of the real friction can kind of begin, with regulatory alignment, technical integration, shareholder buy-in, and operational readiness. So this section is all about what it truly takes to graduate from the sandbox to market adoption. So Yasmin, I'm going to start with you again. One of the biggest challenges is translating a successful sandbox experiment into the live, regulated market real world. What trends tend to be the biggest hurdle with regards to legal frameworks, infrastructure readiness, shareholder alignment, and how can Bahrain address that?
Well, it's really a little bit of everything that you mentioned, Stephen, but I think that, like you rightly said, the journey from the transitioning from the sandbox to market scale is where globally most startups in general face challenges. It's the steepest challenge curve in that period. And I think three of the most challenges are regulatory clarity, access to funding, and then having the supportive infrastructure and legislative environment at a national level. When we speak about regulatory clarity, it's very important to have early conversations with startups and the sandbox to try and identify the most relevant licensing pathways. Those startups would like to know, have a general expectation of the licensing requirements, the capital requirements, operational requirements. So what we do in Bahrain is we work very closely with those sandbox companies, along with our policy team, along with our licensing team, to try and identify clear licensing pathways. When we speak about access to capital, and I think this is a global phenomenon kind of, challenge that a lot of startups face. In Bahrain, we're lucky to have a collaborative Team Bahrain approach, which is basically having an agile government working and collaborating with private sector stakeholders to support startups' access to investors, such as VCs. For instance, we work very closely with the EDB. They help in facilitating investments. They help in bringing VCs to Bahrain. We work very closely with Temkin, our national labor fund, and Temkin provides a lot of support to startups in terms of helping enterprise growth, talent development through subsidies. And of course, Bahrain Fintech Bay, they play a very important role in kind of orchestrating the whole ecosystem together. So this collaborative approach is very important. Now, speaking about the legislative and infrastructure requirements, again, digital financial solutions will not thrive in the absence of the enabling digital infrastructure or enabling legislations and laws at a national level. We're very lucky in Bahrain. The government early on adopted a digital-first approach. So we launched a number of initiatives in Bahrain at a very early stage, such as, we've got advanced payment railways, which is very important. We've got a cybersecurity strategy. We have recently, the government launched the eKey 2.0, which is a digital ID service that enables real-time, reliable verification of IDs, and this will soon be complemented by eKey Business, which will help in supporting onboarding of businesses, will help those businesses get access to funding and other financial services. We also have, when it comes to legislations, we've got the PDPL, which is the Personal Data Privacy Law, which is, again, very important when we're speaking about digital services. Cloud, I think Bahrain, we've been pioneers in cloud with our cloud-first policy. We have access to global databases in Bahrain, global cloud providers in the Kingdom of Bahrain. And, this is very important, and I think one more thing, the government earlier this year also announced the launch of the National Digital Economy Strategy 2030 Bahrain. And this strategy articulates a roadmap for further developing digital infrastructure, supporting innovation, and supporting talent. So this is really cementing Bahrain's position as a digital leading economy by ensuring that we also have a future-ready workforce in place.
Perfect. Yep. And that digital aspect is so important, and it's great that Bahrain is not only doing it but kind of leading the way as well. And so, Susie, from your perspective, how is Bahrain positioning itself with regards to some of the cross-border investment partnerships, talent, especially as competition in regions increases.
I think that's a good point. I think reiterating what as well the governor said and as well as His Excellency this morning, it's like, you know, we're noticing that it's a what is it? It's not the sum of the parts. What was that expression used? A part. We're better when we operate together better than we do like on our own. And I think that's a huge thing. But in going what you're saying, you know, Yasmin brought ahead of a lot of the great new innovations that are happening. But I also think that it's in this era as well. It's about, you know, location attractiveness. If we're looking at from an ecosystem builder, why companies go to be there is, you know, what does the ecosystem offer, right? With us in Bahrain, it's one good aspect is that it's a small country, therefore decision making happens relatively faster than other places in terms of, you know, and on the speed of things. With the talent, we have both. We were talking about talent, but we have people who speak Arabic and English, which is very relevant for companies that are dealing with international and also want to either enter Saudi Arabia. And we're not talking just about Bahrain. Enter the rest of the GCC. Having a talented pool that speaks both Arabic and English is pretty vital, and it sets us apart in Bahrain in terms of when you say competitively, you know, you do get Bahrainis that can speak both, be able to operate. So we do have a lot of talent programs, as Yasmin was talking about, you know, some of the Tamkeen programs and so many, I can go on and on about them, as well as the subsidies. So I think we offer a very competitive scheme with Tamkeen, with the labor funds in terms of subsidies to be able to operate here, and all the labor fund that basically supports your businesses as well. I think one of the most important things that, you know, when you're setting up in Bahrain for these companies, how do we remain really attractive, is that we look at it, you know, we call it gateway to the Gulf, or, you know, using Bahrain as a launch pad. You're not here. One of the biggest misconceptions that I always have to explain to people, I know some of my fellow counterparts in the EDB, or when we're talking to companies, is to say, you know, you're coming to Bahrain not just for the Bahrain market, you're coming for the whole GCC, you know, so we are expansion into MENA. And I think, you know, it's an interesting approach. And talking to, I know we've got members from all over the GCC here today. I really do believe, having visiting your countries and also partnering with your branches, whether it's Oman or whatever, we're dealing with all of the people to bring bridges, build bridges to the fact that we know that these people are coming maybe to set up in your country or in ours, but at the end of the day, they're wanting to serve all of ours. So it is very important that we have that. And these partnerships that we have, what does it do? It brings, you know, the investment into transfer of knowledge. And at the end of the day, we were looking for the region aspect. So I would say Bahrain competitive, yes, but also competitive the fact that, you know, everybody here is not here just for Bahrain. They're here for the region. Yeah.
And that's exactly why I came. I came to Bahrain first, and all the things that you're mentioning I've been supporting, and I've been able to then develop in the UAE, in Qatar, and now Riyadh. So yeah, it's a proven case. So I appreciate that. So Steve, from your perspective, the Regu sandboxes are often seen as ways to strengthen fintech ecosystems. So from a corporate standpoint, what's your perspective on this?
Well, so as corporates, as a broker, we're always open to talk. As I said, that there's a lot of vertical or horizontal collaboration opportunities. Of course, it's derived from the client demand, as I mentioned, whether it could be like a payment services, whether it's like custodian services, or AI-driven supports, and all these are within our ecosystem. What I'm more concerned about is always the revenue stream for every stakeholder within this ecosystem. Without a revenue stream, you know, it's not that sustainable for, you know, both parties. So first of all, we will find an entry to make everybody profitable, but of course comply with the regulators, you know, regime, and that makes things happen.
Yep, fully support revenue streams. It helps the startup survive. So just to let everyone know, we're doing well with time. We're 2/3 through. We're about to go into our fourth section. So in this section, we saw that real challenges of scaling can begin once the idea leaves the sandbox. So aligning with the regulation, integrating technology, and securing institutional buy-in. But even after the solution reaches the live market, there's this second layer that emerges from the cross-border competition, infrastructure maturity, and adoption across multiple jurisdictions. So it's almost like in this part 2, once the solution leaves the sandbox and enters live deployment, the challenges shift. It's no longer about testing an idea, it's about proving it can withstand volume, scrutiny, risk, and multi-institution complexity. So in this section, we then look at the second layer from cross-border harmonization, institutional adoption, and the reality of execution or executing innovation in the real world. So Yasmin, as the Gulf markets introduce their own sandboxes, do you see a future where the environments become more interconnected, allowing innovation to be tested and scaled across borders? And what would be required for that to happen?
Absolutely. And Stephen, I can go on and on speaking about the importance of having regional and global harmonization when it comes to regulations to support this, the digital financial space. I personally see a future where we are going to move towards having a shared innovation ecosystem rather than having isolated testing environments, and that's very important. And for that to happen, I think what we need primarily is regulatory collaboration. This doesn't mean that we as regulators need to have identical frameworks, but it does mean that we need to have some kind of commonality when it comes to having common standards, common supervision mechanisms, assessment mechanisms as well. And I think for us in Bahrain, we've always been a bridge for fintech. We've maintained agreements with global jurisdictions very early on, and we're actually currently in active discussions with our peers in the GCC through formal working groups to try and explore the optimal method of interconnecting our regulatory sandboxes. And this will really help those fintechs scale across the region safely and in a timely manner.
Yeah, and that's my experience. When you apply for the sandbox, sometimes you can see if you've already been accepted somewhere else, so that helps with the rules. So Susie, every ecosystem evolves in waves. Looking ahead, what areas or market capabilities do you believe Bahrain should concentrate on in the leadership position for capital market innovation?
Okay, that's a great one. I think, Yasmin picked up on the central bank and the frameworks for tokenization, digital assets, infrastructure. I think we could probably, if we, the route that we're going down, or that in terms of capital markets, well, we could really be, Bahrain could be a hub for tokenized securities, and I really do see that happening. I think there's more drive to I think one of the key areas is more awareness around what it can do, what it's capable of, and I think that's somewhere Bahrain FinTech Bay can help. A lot of the work we do is in awareness for what could change and where this could go. I know we talked, somebody talked earlier about AI and analytics and real-time platforms. This is very important because we want to build structural advantage. I think that's one of the key things Bahrain we can do with all of the years of history we have, with the frameworks in general. I think that is the way it goes. Something to really build on is, you need the people. And as an ecosystem, you really need the people. I know we are training talent, but we need more, how do you say, specified technical skills of talent. That's been identified, and I know that still needs to go when you're building like this and creating this kind of infrastructure. And I do believe there is going to be a panel on quantum after this, but I think there's, we need to think about a post-quantum strategy, and I think that's also very interesting on what lies ahead and what's going to happen in this arena, in this area in particular.
Yeah.
I think one of the main things, though, is Bahrain and having structural advantage and having those structures in place and being ready for all these things.
Yeah, that's
which some are already here, but still.
Yep, definitely super important with that. And Steve, when a solution succeeds in a sandbox, what determines whether it can scale, from technology, governance, or stakeholder support?
Well, that's a big consortium. I mean, none of those can be absent in terms of technology readiness, regulatory flexibility, and of course the investors' trust. It's all three necessary puzzles in the whole map. What I can tell everybody will be, as long as that we secure the regulators' trust, investors' confidence, and of course the revenue of the corporations, and that's a triple win. All right, so that's the key to make it happen.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's quite clear from this section that scaling doesn't end at deployment. There's a lot more that's required from the resilience, the harmonization, and the ability to operate across markets So with that in mind, let's bring everything together in our final section for the wrap-up and reflect on the mindset and direction that will guide innovation forward. So with our last section that is coming up right now, we've explored the full life cycle today, from foundations to ecosystem activation and real-world scaling. So to close, I want to bring our panel back to the human core of innovation, the intention, the collaboration, and the long-term impact. Regulatory sandboxes aren't just mechanisms, they're commitments. So Yasmin, what advice would you give as startups entering the sandbox for the first time? What mindset leads you to this success?
Well, first of all, I would advise them to have clarity. It's important for them to identify the real problem that they're trying to solve. So know what you're solving for. That's my first advice. Second of all, I think, it's important for them to perceive us regulators as partners, because ultimately transparency builds trust, and trust is required to accelerate innovation. And my third advice, and here I'm wearing my regulatory hat, is have responsible innovation from day one. It should be part of your DNA.
Yeah, and I think that direction is super important, because sometimes a lot of startups, they'll see an idea that they want to do, but for me, the ones that I see succeed are the ones who've experienced the issue, and so then their idea becomes really laser focused, and that helps them succeed as well. So Susie, if you could describe Bahrain's capital markets innovation ecosystem in the world today, in one word, for where it's heading, what would you say that would be and why? Have more than one word.
Well, I guess I'll talk about in general, where it's going. Or if I use one word, I'd say right now Bahrain, its fuel is that we're collaborative. The banks, the regulators, the fintechs, we're all talking to each other, we're collaborating. That is right now how it is, and the willingness to do that is whether we call it Team Bahrain, but it is the willingness for everyone to sit down and to collaborate and talk about that. Now you want to ask me about the future.
Yep, and the future as well.
And the future.
That'd be even better.
Well, I'd say what word could be next is scalable. We do want to see that all this collaboration and everything where we're working together, we're able to scale and take these ideas repeatably and export them and move across where we're going. Because I think that this is how we can define what a model and capitalized markets will end up defining them to be.
Thank you, Susie, for keeping me back on track. I appreciate that. And Steve, what's your perspective?
Well, here's something like, maybe I maybe talk like Jack Ma or whatever, because, start with the user, okay? Real innovation begins with real demand. Sub what matters, okay? So if there's a need, there's a solution. Focus on it. And third, don't wait for perfect clarity, okay? Markets never give it, okay? Last but not the least, move. Insight means nothing without action. That's how we reach the goal here now in Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So we've gone through all our sections, and so I'd like to take this time to thank our amazing panelists and everyone here today, of course. I think one takeaway is clear. Innovation doesn't succeed alone. It succeeds when regulators, ecosystems, and industry move forward together. To me, the sandbox is the spark, the collaboration is the engine, and the real world is where we build the future. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Very insightful and interesting. Thank you so much.